Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Kickoff Show, Section 9 football. I'm here with the usual Isaac Caytano, Ed Estrada. I apologize for the week delay. You know, sometimes life gets in the way a little bit.
Our
But
paying jobs.
what a couple of weeks in football.
Indeed.
Ed,
Let me dodge my worst week.
So yeah, let's start off with not last week, the week prior.
Yeah, and then we got a guest coming on at about 7:50. We'll surprise everybody. Then our first guest of the podcast.
So you know what, Ed, you take it away.
It's all right. So did we want to go back 2 weeks first and talk about, or we want to?
Yeah, let's go back 2 weeks and go over the picks there.
All right. Yep. So we go back 2 weeks, folks, on really what was rivalry type weekend. Yeah. The Eerie Bell was on the line at the time. Spirit Trophy in between Warwick and Goshen, and a couple of other ones that were nip and tuck. And this is where things got interesting. We all had 5-0 records coming into that week. But we'll start off with the first game, Cornwall and Newburgh that week. At Newburgh, Cornwall coming off their first defeat of the year at the hands of Monroe Woodbury, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about later tonight. And really an impressive comeback for Cornwall off of that tough loss at Monroe.
It is, right? You got Monroe Woodbury, who right now is the number 1 team in Class AA, but at that time, Newburgh was the number 1 team in Class AA. You lose to Monroe Woodbury, right? So everybody, you know what I mean? We jumped off the Cornwall train. Well, at least, not everybody, but most people jump off the Cornwall train. Obviously, you lose to Monroe, you're probably going to lose to Newburgh. Monroe hasn't beaten Newburgh since 2019 up to last week. But anyways, like Ed said, Ed called it, the only one out of us three. He said maybe Cornwall gets fired up because of the loss to Monroe Woodbury, right? And look at Newburgh the week before that and go, they had a 14-0 lead. If we think we're better than Minisink, then we got to go and do better than Minisink. And Cornwall did exactly that, went there and shot the Goldbacks out of their own stadium.
Yeah, I think Minisink had the early lead on Newburgh, right? Yes. If I remember correctly, and the Goldbacks had to come back. And we did say, even though we all, two of us, myself and Isaac, picked Newburgh in that ballgame, we did say that the Goldbacks couldn't do that again. They could not let the different team with Cornwall, they can't give them a lead and then have to try to come from behind. So that was a difficult task for them.
And it was the Cornwall defense.
Cornwall is not a team that you want to let jump out in front of you. Even coming off a loss, I think that put more fire in them than anything else. And especially going into Newburgh. Newburgh, you got to jump out quick. You got to be on your game quick because that's another team that you don't want to sit and let get comfortable. Once they get comfortable, you're all done. And with Cornwall coming in there, jumping out the way they did, this is one thing. That's one of the things I said is you cannot let a team like Cornwall jump out, get an early lead, and then they just run away with it.
Yeah, forced 3 interceptions. Forced 3 interceptions, held the quarterback to 84 yards on 25 throws. That's smothering. You're gonna win the football games like that.
Yeah. And then so that gave Ed a 1-game advantage over the both of us as we move on to Minisink and Pine Bush. Another interesting matchup. I had talked about the fact that Pine Bush looked impressive the week before, and I kind of thought maybe they'd kind of hang in there against Minisink and make some noise. It didn't work out that way, but we'll find out a week later when we get to last week's games. Bushmen are going to be a tough out week in and week out for people.
I took the ride to Minisink that Friday. I watched that game, and it was a very impressive game. Pine Bush had to lead. They had the lead majority of the game. They were winning. 85-yard touchdown by Luke Broadbelt to open the game. Plexico Banks, just when Minisink took the lead, takes the kick return all the way back to the house to tie it up. It was a classic. It was an instant classic, and Minisink got the win by 8 points. And they had about 420 yards total on offense, 235 on the ground. Pine Bush is going to be good, though. You know what I mean? I didn't leave that game thinking that Pine Bush was anything less than what I thought they were heading in. In fact, I left that game thinking that Pine Bush is a Class AA competitor for the championship, undoubtedly.
Yeah, whoever plays Pine Bush this year is going to have to make sure they can play run defense because their run game is on point. And their run game, probably just that facet of the game, is up there top 3 or 4, I think, in Section 9, the run game of Pine Bush.
Absolutely.
Ed, any thoughts on Minisink Valley and Pine Bush?
You know what? Pine Bush, I think, is I don't want to get into this, the last week's game. We all had an impression of Pine Bush as, a team that's going to make some waves, that we thought were going to make some waves. So I'm not really surprised that they came out and won the game, but let's get into last week's games, and then I'll give you a little bit more on what I think of Pine Bush now.
Sure. And then the other 2 games, actually 3 other games, we'll do Wallkill, Valley Central. I think most of us across the board, Wallkill had a couple of impressive weeks against different type of competition. I think we all thought the Vikings would come out on top on this one.
Yep, I agree.
No surprises there.
No, we talked about it with Wallkill. You know what I mean? Wanting to see Wallkill take that next step. Always being at the door, always beating teams they're supposed to beat, but not being able to beat the teams that they are not supposed to beat, quote unquote. But we'll see. Still a long season left, and we'll see if Wallkill can take that step.
And then we move on to the Spirit Trophy, Warwick against Goshen. Ed and I saw Goshen in our game that we covered for 845 Sports Nation against Kingston. A nice comeback for the Gladiators in that ball game against the Tigers, and it was going to be a tough one against Warwick. Warwick can put up some points with the best of them this year in Section 9, and they proved it week in and week out. They're going to be another team that folks got to keep an eye out. Their defense is better, the Wildcats, than in previous years. So that kind of, it's still not to the standard that you probably see a Monroe play or a Cornwall play, but it is better than previous Wildcat years. And their offense is the same as it's always been as far as productivity. So
their quarterback, Brody Frederick, playing out of his mind. He's playing out of his mind. He's got 14 passing touchdowns through 4 weeks of play, about 1,150 yards. He's leading the section by far, nearly 300 yards in front of the entire section, only on 50 attempts. He's only thrown the ball 50 times. So he's playing out of his mind, 3 interceptions, you know what I mean? But when you throw the ball 50 times, 14 touchdowns, 1,200 yards, you know what I mean? Interceptions come, but he's playing out of his mind. The Warwick defense is better, Ed, but scared me last week, letting up 30 points to Lords. And I know we'll get there. That kind of scared me because if
Lords is down this year. I agree.
Down heading into that game, Lords, if I'm not mistaken, only scored about 10 points.
They got shut out by Monroe the week.
They got shut out by Monroe and Pine Bush, 33-0. So 30 points kind of scared me for Warwick, but they got the Spirit Trophy, and that's a great thing in Warwick.
Yeah, the Sullivan brothers, Dylan and Ryan, both doing a trick for Wildcat Nation. But you're right. Eventually, when you get down to these games in late October, and if you want to make a run into November with a sectional championship, you do have to tighten up on the defensive side.
Yeah, so, real quick, football and Section 9 aside, I just got an ESPN update. Pete Rose has died, 83.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so,
on the good news.
Yeah. So I don't even know how to react to that one.
I just got holy cow.
Mr. Rose. But so then we move on from the Spirit Trophy to the Eerie Bell game. And I had the honor, Ed was also there, of covering it this year. There was a lot of pomp and circumstance in Middletown at Fowler Field during the pregame as Middletown introduced its second Wall of Fame class. So there was that pomp and circumstance. We had a very moving moment of silence pregame for Middletown legendary head coach Dick Woolslayer, with Middletown naming the front entrance to the field Woolslayer Gate. So I think we did the family proud. I've been in contact with the family. They were very happy with the way the ceremony went. It was moving. And then, unfortunately,
that was the highlight.
Mr. Caytano said that after his game in Monticello, he'd meet the bell at I-84 westbound. And really, listen, I had to pick Middletown. You all know I had to pick Middletown. And but exactly the way Port, the only question mark coming into this game was whether or not Port's results were a competitor factor, right, from the first 2 weeks compared to the two teams that Middletown played, and whether or not that would have any sort of impact. And after the first quarter, there was no, you knew what was going to probably be the end result here. Just too many mistakes on the Middletown side of the football. But, ultimately, that Port Jervis offense was relentless. They were pounding the ball. They were finding holes that we knew Middletown had in the secondary. The Mini Bears, obviously did a great bounce back win in a game that was probably technically not emotionally as important as Port Jervis, but league-wise was more importantly this past week against Kingston for them, and we'll talk about that later. But Port Jervis was dominant in this Eerie Bell game. We expect them to be that way for the rest of the year.
Yes, and we had our rivalry game against Liberty up in Monticello. It was a pretty happy Saturday for me. Scored the
54-16.
54-16. Scored the second highest points in a single game Monticello history. And by the time I got out of there, celebrating with the coaches, with the players, I drove down 42 and made it home. I heard the sirens and got to see the bell come in town. Fortunately, I live on a main road, so I got home. As I got home, they were coming right down my road. And I would show the video, but I don't want to make Ed sad or anything.
No. Listen, they dominated. Middletown had one, and Ed will tell you, one window of opportunity. The game was 14-0 right before the half. And Middletown had the ball to start the second half.
Yep.
So they scored their touchdown, right? They to make it 14-7. Had they stopped Port in that last minute of play, they would have gotten the ball to start the second half with the opportunity to tie. But right over the top, Dylan scores on a long pass over the top on what you couldn't do if you're a Middletown secondary. You let the I think it was Elijah Campbell went right down. I don't know if it was Elijah Campbell.
No, it wasn't my brother. I think it was Anthony Theodore.
Okay, it was Theodore right down the seam, right down the middle between two of the Middletown safeties, and that made it 20-7. And you couldn't do anything. Now Middletown did drive all the way deep into Port Jervis territory on the opening series of the second half, but they fumbled the ball. I think it was at like the Port Jervis 30-yard line, and then that was the end of the game for the most part. Ed, you want to add anything on the Eerie Bell game?
No, you know what? It's a game like that's got a lot, obviously a lot of history to it. And, how long has Middletown had the trophy? 2 years?
No, it was one season.
Oh, it's just one season.
The Bell since 2020, since the COVID season, has gone back and forth.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean,
to the visitors.
Yeah, Port Jervis,
which is so odd, right, Ed? And then before that, in 2019, when I played, Middletown had the Bell, I think, 6 consecutive seasons. So nobody has really been able to assert their dominance in terms of a long-term possession of the Bell, and which is actually surprising. It's pretty crazy to see. The Bell has been going back and forth. I know it's tired of being painted.
So now the records are updated here. You can see them on the podcast, on the video. I'm at 9-6. Both Ed and Isaac are at 11-4, which means I'm going to have some creative thinking when it comes to picks moving on and try to catch back. We weren't able because we didn't have the podcast last week in order to do some picks, but we cannot move on to this week's picks without briefly going over to what happened last week. Obviously highlighted by a Monroe team that we now have to start talking about here, folks, because they really had a great game on the road at Newburgh. Their first win at Newburgh since when? I want to say
2019.
2019. The Crusaders, an outstanding job. They're doing what Monroe football has been about when they were really winning the division each and every year. And
what's the magic number, Ed?
What happened?
What's the magic number?
21, I'm sorry. Wasn't it?
21.
21 was the magic number. And, they continue to do what they're supposed to do. They kept Newburgh to 14 points. They put up 28, which is a lot for Monroe, right, against a Newburgh team. Yeah. But now they're undefeated still with impressive wins against Cornwall and an impressive win against Newburgh. You got to think, Isaac, that they got to be right now the number one team just ahead of Port Jervis in Section 9.
Undoubtedly. I have Newburgh right there. I mean, I have Monroe Woodbury right at number one. Their run game, they got the best run game in Section 9 right now. Nate Kalangis leads the section with 615 yards, 82 attempts, his longest being 90 yards and 7 touchdowns. He's having an absolute monstrous year, and they're playing defense. Anytime you get those two things, well, what do you get? That's a recipe for a successful season. And early on, right, we talked about it, and I said I thought that it would be all repeats. Oddly enough, I don't believe, sitting here right now, I don't believe we're going to see Newburgh or Middletown playing in the Class AA championship. I believe we're going to end up seeing Monroe Woodbury against Pine Bush in the Class AA championship sitting here right now at this very moment. And we're gonna and we get a preview.
Well, you're gonna know very quickly in 2 weeks, and you're gonna get a preview nation when Newburgh visits Middletown. So one of those two teams, and you can argue that Newburgh on that game needs it more than Middletown because at least Middletown's 1-0 in the league right now, and Newburgh lost in the division. So having lost Newburgh and Middletown. At the top there would only leave essentially the Middies and Pine Bush with an opportunity to make noise into the final. I don't discount what you're saying right now. The Bushmen have a good enough run game. The question is, can they play defense?
Can they play defense?
Yeah. 36 Monroe right now sitting pretty, playing Monroe style football, good defense. Opportunistic offense, a good running game with great blocking from their offensive line. And more importantly, what do the Crusaders never do each and every year, even when they're having bad years? They never turn the ball over, right? They are a fundamentally sound team, which means you got to take it from them. You got to win the game. You can't rely on them making a mistake because it's just not going to happen.
Yep. I agree.
So that's one game that we had. We got to mention your Monticello team, consecutive wins for the first time since
2016.
So congratulations. So how serious we're going to take the Monties moving here?
Last time Monticello was 500. I was 10 years old. I had no idea what Monticello, New York was. You know what I mean? Oddly enough, I got the smallest team. I've been coaching in Monticello for 4 seasons. I got the smallest team I ever had, probably the less talent we ever had. But these kids, man, they just work hard and they're buying in. You know what I mean? I firmly believe they're sick of losing. They're sick of always being the underdog, sick of always coming back to school with a loss. You know what I mean? And finally starting to see where hard work can take them. You know what I mean? We don't got to beg these kids to work hard, and it's paying off. We went to O'Neill. That was the first Friday night win since 2017. So these guys, they're playing football. We got a big opponent ahead of us this week in Burke Catholic. So we know it's going to be a physical game. We've been playing physical, but we know we're going to get banged up this week, and we're just going to go out there every week and give it our best shot as we continue to do. You know what I mean? Two wins is already more than we won last season, and these guys are just working hard. So who knows where we can go? Who knows how?
You want to see successful football up in the Catskills? It'll make it fun up in Monticello.
So. It really will. It feels good. The kids come back to school. And the community actually taking pride in being from Monticello. Underneath the varsity program, a modified program just won their second game back to back. They hadn't won the game in 5 years since the COVID season. We got a great coaching staff who's working their tail off with these guys. So it's 2 big wins back to back, and hopefully we can continue that.
So we're going to move on real quick. I do want to make a shout out to Middletown, a nice bounce back win over Kingston up at Dietz Stadium. It's been a tough road for the Tigers after that initial opening week win over Nyack, with losses to Goshen, Beacon, and now Middletown. So, things a little rough for the Tigers out there. And then, Pine Bush and Valley Central, interesting lead into the fact that, Valley Central had come in off of a win, and now the Bushmen kind of reestablished themselves after that loss to Menacing Valley. So real quick, we're going to have our guest on here in a couple of minutes, but we also want to make our picks. Do you want to leave the picks for after our guest, Ed?
Yeah, we could do that. Or I mean, if we want to roll through them really quick, we can do that. We can get Kevin on here.
Yeah, we can do that. So we move on to this week's games on Friday, October 4th and Saturday, October 5th. Also want to remind people, the following week after that is an early week, I think, due to the Jewish holidays. So there are some Thursday games the following week. So be aware of that. We're going to start off with Walk Hill and Kingston at Walk Hill High School. Let me know what you think, Mr. Diller.
I'm going to go with Kingston. I don't think Walk Hill is. You know what? They're still on the board, on the line or on the rope there. I just think Kingston's going to be the better team and come away with the win.
Isaac,
I agree. I'm going to go with. I believe it's going to be a 50-50 game. I don't think one team is going to completely dominate. I'm going to switch sides, go with Walk Hill since they're the home team. I'm going to go with the home team on this one. I'll go with Walk Hill. It's a great environment playing at Walk Hill High School. I think that'll give them exactly what they need to go over the hump. Kingston is playing good football. They scored 21 points on Middletown, which is a good number. You know what I mean? They only scored they didn't score anything against Beacon. So the 21 against Middletown, that really shocked me. I expected them to probably get shut out as well, but that didn't happen. So I think Kingston is the favorites. I'm going to roll with the underdogs in this one. I'm going to go with Walk Hill.
I, too, am going to go with the home dogs. So I'm going to pick the Panthers this week. I need to make some inroads against Mr. Diller and that 11-4 record that he's got laid in the face in the upper left-hand corner over there. So I'm going to go with the Panthers. Moving on, Cornwall, Middletown. This game going to be played at Cornwall. Middletown coming off its first win of the season. It's a non-divisional game for them. But Cornwall, I don't think Cornwall wants to lose again the rest of the year.
No, I don't think Cornwall wants to lose, and I don't think Cornwall will lose the rest of the year. I think Cornwall is going to win this game in a pretty convincing fashion. They allowed 10 points to Newburgh. I expect it to be in the same range against Middletown. Middletown let up 21 to Kingston. I think Cornwall is going to come in there and give them probably the same. I see the same results. Cornwall, Newburgh, 36-10, somewhere in that frame.
I agree. I'm going to go with Cornwall as well. I know, Ed.
Right. Jelani, if you're out there, come on, man. Come on. I need you this week. I got to go with the Middies. I know it's definitely a big underdog move here, but I just got to hope that the running game gets established. There is no doubt that the main concern in Middy Bear land is going to be that Cornwall offense against that Middletown secondary. And until they prove that they can stop a passing offense, it's going to be difficult for Middletown moving on. But obviously, I got to go with my Middy Bears.
That's it.
So we'll move on from Cornwall, Middletown, and head on down to Saugerties and Beacon. The Bulldogs coming off their first loss of the year, right? I believe.
Yep, first loss of the year.
Convincingly for the Red Raiders, but they're going to take on a Saugerties team that is hungry and at home. Both teams at 3-1. What do you think, Isaac?
Tough one here. I'm going to go with Beacon. I'm going to take Beacon on the road at Saugerties. Beacon's quarterback got hurt at the end of the Port Jervis game. If he's still out, then I don't know. But I think I'm going to bank on him coming back, and I'm going to stick with my pick. I'm going to go with Beacon. Beacon's playing good football. They hung in there pretty well a little bit with Port Jervis, obviously, before the blowout. Put 12 points on Port Jervis. which isn't a lot of points, but they played good. You know what I mean? I watched the tape a little bit. Obviously, Paul Jervis playing here, so I didn't expect it to be hand in hand. I kind of knew they'd get that first loss. I think Beacon knew they'd get it too, but I'm going to go with Beacon and beat Saugerties on the road. I'm going to roll with Beacon. I'm going to roll with the Bulldogs.
I agree. Beacon on the road.
I think it's tough. Saugerties, their one loss coming on against Marlboro. I think it was 23-6 or something like that. So I'm going to roll with the Bulldogs as well. So everybody on the same on there. Then we move on to Monroe Woodbury and Pine Bush. This game being played at Crusader Nation down in Central Valley. Mr. Diller, we'll start off with you. Pine Bush and Monroe Woodbury.
This is one of those 50-50 games, I think.
It really is.
It's basically flip a coin and take your pick. But I'm going to take the home team. I'm going to take Monroe over Pine Bush.
Isaac?
I'm going to roll with Monroe Woodbury here. I'm going to go with the number one team in Section 9 right now. I think to be the king, you got to beat the king. Let me tell you what a big weekend it will be if Pine Bush goes to Monroe Woodbury and beat the Crusaders. That will be huge.
Yep, that would be the story in Section 9.
That would be huge.
Yep, the Menacing Valley loss kind of bugs me a little bit with Pine Bush, and like I said, you're going to have to beat Monroe. They're not going to lose the game because they've made mistakes.
So now the question comes in with exactly what you asked, Ed. Can Pine Bush play defense?
Yeah, Monroe just put up 28 points against Newburgh. Right. So I think there's, I don't want to say no doubt on anything, but Monroe has the better defense. Monroe's given up 14 points to the Goldbacks this past week.
Pine Bush just let up 200 yards on the ground.
I think the stats and the way things have gone so far lead to Monroe Woodbury. And so I think it's going to be the Crusaders as well. Then our last game we're going to pick, Our Lady of Lourdes in Washingtonville. Lourdes with an impressive showing point-wise in their last game, and the Wizards coming away with a win as well.
Yeah, this is going to be tough. I went to Washingtonville on Saturday, saw them play FDR. I was very impressed with what I saw. Big team, deep team. As far as who gets the win between them and Lourdes, last week I would have said Washingtonville easily. But Lourdes getting to put 30 points on Warwick. I don't know if that's a testament to Warwick's defense or a testament to maybe Lourdes is putting things together. But I'm gonna go. I picked against Washingtonville last week, kind of in the stretch. I'm gonna go with the Wizards this week. I'm gonna pick Washingtonville to beat Lourdes.
And Ed?
I'm gonna take Lourdes over Washingtonville.
Yeah, I think I'm actually gonna take the Warriors. I think they're gonna be hungry for a win. They're at home, and I think they were happy with the amount of points they put up last week. And I think the Warriors find a way to sneak out a win up in Poughkeepsie against Washingtonville this week. So moving on to our special guest, our first one in our podcast. We want to join to the show, Mr. Kevin Halpenny. He is one of the radio voice with his partner, Tom Fagione, for the Port Jervis Red Raiders, arguably one of the two hottest teams in Section 9 between Monroe Woodbury and Port Jervis. And Kevin and Tom can also be heard on the airwaves at WDLC Country 95.3 and 107.7, as well as 1490 AM. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Halpenny. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you guys very much for having me. This is pretty exciting.
What's up, guys?
It's an honor. Isaac, how you doing? Ed,
How you doing, man?
Kevin, how are you?
I'm very, very good.
You, knowing that you gave us a nice little spanking at Fowler Field to take that little metal object back I-84 westbound. Tell us a little bit about the Red Raiders this year and how they've progressed since their opening game, how they've learned over the last 2 years, having lost in the state playoffs in the early rounds, and how far you think they might be going this year.
So I think the sky is really the limit for Port this year. And the reason why is first because they have an offensive line that is really physical and fast. They're seasoned. Most of the kids who are on the offensive line this year played last year. They are really, really strong. and the defensive line is just as good. And if you can be strong up front, you can really do anything. You can beat anybody for the most part. And if you play disciplined, and if you don't lose any of those guys to injuries, there's probably, I think it goes without saying, right? There's nowhere more physical on the field than the line of scrimmage. So if those guys can stay healthy, the sky is the limit. And the other thing is Dylan Fox. The progression that Dylan has made has been incredible to watch.
And you got him for another year.
So he got thrown into starting against Minnesink last year. I want to say it was just about a year ago. It might have been week 3 but it was tough. It was a really ugly game for Port. It was an ugly game for Dylan. You could tell he was a bit in over his head, and where he is now a year later, it's staggering. The throws that he is making right now, the accuracy, the decision making is just phenomenal. It's really, really impressive.
In his feet.
Yeah, I mean, I just, the game against Beacon, we didn't know what to expect. I talked to their coach, and I got a real good vibe about their team, like their culture. He has really changed their culture in Beacon. And you get a group of kids, Isaac, you're a coach.
Yes, sir.
If you get a group of kids to buy in, you were just talking about it. You can do anything.
Yeah.
And so they were putting like 8 in the box in the beginning of the game, and Port couldn't move the ball on the ground.
Yeah.
So Dylan just stepped back and just carved them up. Like, it was wild to see what he was doing. 5 touchdown passes, and then he, on his feet, hit a 77-yard touchdown run, and he accounted for almost 500 total yards. But the passing was just sensational. He got picked off early in the game, but after that, it was remarkable to watch.
5 touchdown passes to 4 different receivers.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned, and what I came away, and what I've been impressed with Port the entirety of the year so far, is that the multitude of weapons they have, both in the backfield as well as on the receiving end of the football, that takes a lot of load off your quarterback. When they know that any time they can throw the ball up and any of them can come down, whether it's Maddox or Campbell or Theodore, come down with the football, and on the ground as well.
Ocean.
It's just so much that you got to deal with as a defense, right? Going into that game, because everybody's got to be on their toes, because any one of them can take it to the house offensively for them. And I've said it from week 1. I think this is a Port team that obviously is not only going to win their class in Section 9, but I think this is the year they finally. You remember those old Houston Oilers with Bum Phillips as the coach, and every year in the playoffs, who did they come up against? Chuck Noll and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they would lose every year. And Bum Phillips used to say, one of these days we're going to knock the damn door down. Yep. And that's kind of how you feel with Port the last couple of years. They run into these Section 1 teams, and they've come close. Pleasant Valley one year, and I forgot who the team was last year.
Pleasantville, Rye.
Yeah, Pleasantville.
Yeah. This year it's looking like it's going to be Bronxville again.
Yeah. So, but I think Port's got the ingredients to make it work this year and make a deep run into this state tournament, Kevin. How do you feel about that?
I agree with you. We are really excited. We're trying to be cautiously optimistic. It's a really different game at the state level.
Yes,
Section 1 is always loaded. I like Port's chances against Section 1 this year. You have Rye moving back up to A. Pleasantville's down. Bronxville looks really good. Port played Bronxville a couple years ago in week 0, and Bronxville is up from Class C.
And in the state playoffs.
Yeah, and they played O'Neill in the state playoffs last year.
Yeah.
I like the matchup there. And Port is doing something this year too. Like when they made their semifinal run in 2019, I remember at the end of the season thinking, like, all these running backs they played that had gaudy numbers. I would leave the game thinking, like, that guy wasn't that good. And then I realized at the end of the year they were that good.
Yeah.
But Port's defense was that much better.
Yeah.
And this defense, Isaac, you brought up Carol Dolshin. As gifted a running back as he is, he's probably a better defender. He is outrageous as an end rusher. He is a lot for everybody to handle. And, we came into the season knowing about the captains as far as the offensive weapons that Dillon has. We knew about Anthony, we knew about Maddox, and we knew about Dolshin. But you had Elijah Campbell and Austin Mack, who's a sophomore, and Sidney Bakari, who's a junior, who's a perfect complement to Dolshin running the ball. It's scary. And Dillon can run too.
It reminds me, Port Jervis right now reminds me of the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson, 10 carries against Beacon, 131 yards. He's got about 300. He got about 300 yards on the ground, about 700 in the air. I mean, the kid's doing whatever he wants. And then, when when Dillon's going left, Carol Dolshin's going right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I had to legitimately game plan against this team last season, and there's not much game planning you can do.
No. And I mean, what I noticed in their game against Middletown are two things, both around Dillon. One is his maturity from last year to this year, especially in the realm of decision making.
Certainly.
And also, you just have the vibe, the feel of confidence that he feels that even if he makes a mistake, his coaches and his players and his teammates got his back. And I think when you go out there and you can play with that aura of confidence, knowing that, people trust me to make this decision or that decision. And if it comes up short, we come back to the huddle and try it again. I think that says a lot, and you can kind of see it. They had a real aura about them that they were going to win that game, and that they were, very methodical, and they were very happy. And we talked about the fact that earlier that there was one window of opportunity in that Eerie Bell game, and that was the end of the first half and the beginning of the second half. Middletown had the ball to start the second half. They were driving with a 14-0 game. Middletown did what they were supposed to do with their drive and scored a touchdown. And all they needed to do was play defense. And I thought for a second, right, this is where maybe last year with Dillon as the quarterback, they're not as aggressive on offense on that last drive, because that drive started deep in their own territory, right? And instead, they opened up the playbook, didn't sit back on their 7-point lead, and ended up with a touchdown right down the seam against some shoddy secondary play. And that broke the back. And even though Middletown came back to start the second half and drove the ball, they ended up fumbling deep in Port Jervis territory to kind of put the nail in the coffin in that game. They responded. Port Jervis responded right away to that Middletown score. And I think that was the biggest difference in that ball game.
And that's one of the great things. That's one of the great things about Port Jervis. I know myself playing in that exact program exactly when it turned around. Right, we embody the characteristics of our coaches. Exactly, what I mean. That Coach Salado, Coach Saharsky, the offense and the defensive coordinator, and those two guys, and almost everybody on that staff. I know, Hipsman's back, not Hipsman, Hartman. They have personalities. Like, these are coaches full of personality. Coaches also who make you want to play for them. They make you want to play for them. When I played on the defense, I wanted to do good for Coach Saharsky. I wanted to play hard for Coach Saharsky. He coached us hard. He had a personality about him. You know what I mean? And he had a motto. He had a mantra. And we wanted to play good for our coaches because they did a lot for us. Coach Delado, you know what I mean? That is one of the toughest guys I've ever met in my life. You know what I mean? And the offense reflects that. They reflect that kind of football, the kind of football he played. During 2 days, during lunch, during the break, he was in the weight room, Coach Salado. You know what I mean? Well, you don't really see coaches now. You get to see your coach during 2 days at lunch break, and they're in the weight room working out. We wanted to be like that. We wanted to achieve that level of excellence, that level of greatness. And that was in 2019. So seeing the formula and the recipe work out for us, winning that championship in 2019, and the teams who follow, they're following in our footsteps as well as those coaches. You know what I mean? This happened kind of overnight for this program. And I told you guys this, I keep saying it every week. Port Jervis is running on autopilot right now. Mm-hmm. Okay, my little brother, my little cousin, Elijah Campbell, Nashawn Campbell, Mookie, Soup. We won the first title there in 2019. These guys aren't graduating until 2025. My little brother, Port Jervis, has not lost the Class B title since we won it. That is a dynasty. That's 6 years.
Kevin, tell us a little bit about New Paltz and what's coming up for Port Jervis this week.
New Paltz is coming off of a loss against Marlboro. They're a little bit down this year, but I did notice that their quarterback's last name is pretty familiar. It's Drunowski. He's the younger brother of Troy Drunowski, who beat Port 2 years ago in a monster upset. It kind of woke the Raiders up that year. They ended up seeing New Paltz again in the sectional final, and that game wasn't close. But you just never know. You can't take anybody lightly. Isaac, you said something that every kid that we've talked to this year has also echoed, and that's we're happy with how we've played so far, but we have more work to do. We can get better, and we're going to keep working to get better. Yep. And they also aren't taking anybody lightly. They have a very business-like attitude at the moment. And high school football teams do this all the time. You get caught maybe a little bit overconfident or a little bit complacent.
Or watching your next game because you have Marlboro the week after, I think, right?
Yep. And the other thing is that with Port being a 5-time champ, they're going to get everybody's best shot. They're the game on everybody else's schedule. Like when Port comes or when we go to Port, we got to play our A game. So they're going to get everybody's best shot. So if they
not even to cut you off, but not even the best shot to win. Some teams aren't, you know what I mean? The plan isn't even to beat Port Jervis right now. The plan is let's hang in it, let's compete. Let's show, right? Because they're a great market now. If we compete with Port Jervis, we can almost say we can compete with almost anybody in the section. So you are getting the best shot for multiple reasons.
So, Kev, before we let you go, anything else standing out in Section 9 football for you right now? Because Kevin also does some of these other games that they set up for War Radio. I know they do the Middletown football games as well. So you and Tom are very well versed on what's going on in Section 9 football. Tell us about anybody else that stands out for you right now.
Well, we try to be. We try to watch the other games that are going on. Double A, you guys mentioned before, it is crazy wide open, it feels. I was shocked to see how easily Cornwall handled Newburgh from a on paper point of view. I didn't watch the highlights or anything, but that was a pretty wide margin of victory. And that's no disrespect to Cornwall, but that's Newburgh. That's the biggest school size-wise in the section. And then Monroe handled them at Newburgh as well. Like that's 2 losses for Newburgh at home, which is stunning because they were in the sectional final last year and
they lost the sectional final at home. So that's 3 straight losses at Newburgh going back to last year. But
it's, Monroe has kind of taken a step back. You mentioned before, in the early 2000s, they kind of owned Double A. And it's nice to see them back.
We have Kevin buffering a little bit. So we'll see how things turn out. I know he was just talking about Monroe Woodbury on there. Yeah. So we'll give him another.
Yeah, we'll give him a minute or two if he don't come back. It looks up. Hold on a minute. No, he's not back.
He's buffering. But his point, he brought up exactly the teams we've been talking about in regards to who's making noise. Port Jervis, obviously. Monroe Woodbury, obviously. I would have liked to have, the issues with Newburgh at home all of a sudden. I totally forgot about that game last year. I shouldn't have because it was a Middletown game. But that is now, right? Because these were the first 2 home games for Newburgh. They started on the road, right?
They had Minnesink. No, they had 3 home games. They had Minnesink, which was a little scary, but they bounced back.
You thought that Minnesink game was in Slate Hill?
Nope. That Minnesink game.
Oh, okay. So they're my bad. They have not lost 3 in a row at home. Okay.
Yep. They had the one against Minnesink. Then they had Cornwall. Then they had Monroe.
Yeah, they've lost 3 or 4 at home.
They lost. Yep. 3 or 4. And the last time Newburgh lost back-to-back at home, I don't know.
I don't remember.
I can't tell you.
That's a testament to, and this is not. Listen, this is not to shun the Goldbacks in any way. They've lost at home 2 weeks in a row, but they've arguably lost to 2 of the top 3 teams in Section 9 in Cornwall and Monroe Woodbury. Right. If you take the fact that Port Jervis is in a different class, but Class A champion in Cornwall, always a state finalist or one of the state playoff teams. And then the same thing with the Monroe Woodbury team. That's hard. So it's not like they lost to Pansies at home. They lost some difficult games that, if those two teams, Cornwall and Monroe, go back to back into any other field in Section 9, those teams might be 0-2 too.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, guys. You know what? Good show. We covered a lot of football.
I want to, real quick, Ed, I just want to mention one last time, want to thank Kevin Halpenny for coming on and to give a shout out for the stations that they cover, football, WDLC Country, 95.3 and 107.7, as well as 1490 AM. Kevin Halpenny, Tom Fagione, Port Jervis, Red Raider football.
All right. Thanks a lot again, guys. And we'll see everybody next week.
All right.
Have a good one.